Hey everyone, and welcome. So, every year, especially around the Met Gala, this one word gets thrown around like confetti: camp. We see these wild, flamboyant outfits, the totally over-the-top entrances, and we kind of just nod along, right? But what are we actually talking about? What is camp? Well, today, we're going to unpack this fabulous, funny, and honestly, super important way of seeing the world.
So our journey into understanding camp, at least for the mainstream, really kicks off in 1964. That's when the writer Susan Sontag published this game-changing essay called Notes on Camp. Now before this, camp was more of an insider's language, a sensibility that was really understood within queer communities. Sontag's essay, well, it was the first big attempt to spell it out for everybody else.
And this quote right here, this is the absolute heart of it. Camp isn't about what's natural or what's beautiful in the traditional sense. Nope, it's a whole different kind of appreciation. It's a way of looking at things and absolutely delighting in them for being too much. Too artificial, too stylized, just extra. It finds genius where so-called good taste might just see a total failure.
Okay, so an abstract definition is one thing, but camp is something you have to feel, you have to see. It's all about the visual, the performance. To really, truly get it, you need some examples. So let's take a look.
I mean, just think about Lady Gaga at the 2019 Met Gala. That wasn't just walking down a red carpet. No way. It was a full-blown 16-minute piece of performance art. She had 4 different outfits, peeling them off one by one. It was pure theater, a deliberate, glorious spectacle. That is camp.
Or, we can rewind a little bit to the legendary Carmen Miranda. Her entire persona, especially those gigantic fruit hats, it was so wonderfully exaggerated that it almost felt like a parody of being a woman. It was so theatrical that, as the saying goes, it was like she was a woman playing the part of a man who was impersonating a woman. It's genius.
And then you have something like John Waters' movie Pink Flamingos. This film intentionally takes what we call bad taste and cranks it up to 11, and then it throws a party to celebrate it. It's rebellious, it's shocking, and it finds this incredible humor in what society thinks is grotesque. That kind of rebellion, that's a really powerful form of camp.
So you've got a pop star's performance art, a classic Hollywood icon, and a super underground cult film. On the surface, they seem worlds apart, but they are all speaking the exact same secret language. So let's crack the code, shall we?
Okay, first thing we have to get our heads around is that camp isn't just a style, like, say, minimalism. It's what's called a sensibility. It's a whole particular lens for looking at and making sense of the world around you.
All right, so here's the more official textbook definition. Camp finds things appealing because they're so artificial and over the top. It's a genuine love for things that aren't even trying to seem natural. Instead, they're just reveling in the fact that they're constructed, that they're a performance. Now, this quote from Christopher Isherwood, it just nails it. This is so important. Camp isn't about being mean or mocking something you hate. It's actually a really affectionate, if, ironic, way of celebrating something you genuinely love. You're taking something you find serious or important, and you're filtering it through this lens of fun and style and performance.
And this way of thinking, it has such a long, fascinating history. You can trace it all the way back to 17th century France, and this term se scamper, which literally means to strike an exaggerated pose. By the middle of the 20th century, it had become this really vital part of gay culture, a way for a community that was pushed to the margins to find joy, build an identity, and use humor as a kind of armor against a hostile world. And this was all happening long before Sontag brought it into the mainstream spotlight.
Okay, so we've got the background. But how do you actually spot camp out in the wild? Well, lucky for us, the cultural anthropologist Esther Newton broke it down into 3 key signs. Think of this as your official camp spotting field guide.
First up, look for incongruity. That's just a fancy word for a clash, a mismatch. The classic example is drag. You have this powerful incongruity between a traditionally masculine body and this incredible, exaggerated performance of femininity. Second, theatricality. Camp is all about performance, style, and how things are presented. It treats life like a stage. And third, of course, is humor, a very specific kind of witty, ironic humor that just delights in extravagance and in things that other people might just call tacky.
All right, we've now arrived at the most critical test in our whole journey to understanding camp. This is the one thing that trips almost everyone up. What is the difference between camp and its very close but very different cousin,
kitsch.
So here's the big question. If you see something that's just tacky, like a garden gnome or a velvet Elvis painting, is that automatically camp? The answer is almost always no. And the reason why is maybe the most important takeaway of this whole explainer. And boom, here it is. This is the whole shebang. Kitsch is basically failed seriousness. That little garden gnome is trying with all its heart to be a cute, charming decoration. It has zero idea that anyone might find it tacky. Kitsch is not in on the joke. Camp, on the other hand, is the one telling the joke. It is totally self-aware. It knows it's being artificial, it knows it's being too much, and that's the entire point. It's winking at you. Okay, but here's where it gets a little tricky. Sontag actually made a distinction between deliberate camp and what she called naive camp. So take a movie by the director Douglas Sirk. It was made with 100% sincerity. But the drama is so heightened, the emotions are so intense, that today it feels just unbelievably over the top. A camp sensibility can look at that and appreciate it as camp, even though it was never intended to be.
Now compare that to a true master of deliberate camp, the one and only Cher. An artist like Cher, especially when she's wearing one of her iconic Bob Mackie outfits, knows exactly what she is doing. The sequins, the feathers, the sheer spectacle of it all. It's a conscious, brilliant performance of glamour and excess. That self-awareness, that wink, that's the key.
So why does this sensibility, with roots in the 17th century and 1960s queer culture, feel so incredibly relevant right now? Well, because its core purpose, its main function, has never been more needed, especially when you look online.
When you boil it all down, camp has always been a coping mechanism. It's a strategy for survival. It's a way to process difficult, sometimes awful realities, whether that's social alienation or political chaos, by reframing them as a kind of theater. It's a way to survive through irony and humor.
Just look at classic millennial humor. The "this is fine" meme is pretty much a perfect modern example of the camp spirit. It's not just a funny cartoon dog. It's therapeutic self-irony. It's a way for a whole generation dealing with huge pressures to look at the chaos around them and just acknowledge it with this calm, absurd detachment. It's literally laughing so you don't cry.
And Gen Z? They take this idea and just blast it into another dimension. Their humor often becomes completely absurd, almost postmodern. When you're facing even greater global chaos, the humor often just escapes reality altogether. Think about those totally surreal, nonsensical TikToks. The joke isn't a clever punchline. The joke is the joyful, complete detachment from a world that just feels way too overwhelming.
And this quote from Andrew Bolton, the curator who is actually behind the Met's big camp exhibit, he just sums it up perfectly. This sensibility, it thrives in times of chaos and times of instability and polarization. When the world itself feels extreme, our art and our humor start to reflect that extremity right back at us.
Which, it leaves us with this one last kind of mind-bending question. Camp was born as a way to push back against the mainstream, to subvert all that seriousness. But what happens when the mainstream itself becomes a nonstop spectacle of exaggeration and artifice? In a world of deep fakes and reality TV politics and perfectly curated online lives, has the camp way of seeing things stopped being a subversion and just become realism? Is it still a joke, or is it just the evening news?